Hi, welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. All right, so today what I want to do is talk about the archetypal sports movie. The archetypal sports movie. This is a movie, Hoosiers, which I saw uh, over and over and over when I was a kid because we had a VHS copy of the movie. Gene Hackman, classic sports movie about Indiana basketball. Um, so I'm going to treat this as a combination of a rags to riches and an overcoming the monster story. I think that there's a real sense that you have both elements, rags to riches and overcoming the monster in the archetypal sports movie. You could apply this to Moneyball. You could apply this to Rudy. You could apply this to a lot of different sports movies. They have a very remarkably similar formula. And so what I want to do though is I want to unveil my what I'm calling my monsterology project. And so in order to get into the details of this movie, I need to explain a couple things about the landscape, the map of the story archetypal world. So here's how I'm going to do it. So you can think of there are three realms. This would map on, of course, to ancient cosmology in terms of heaven, earth, and the waters below the earth. Um, but basically, three things that need to happen. So you don't have to think of it as physical spaces. You can think of them as spaces within the story. You might say, um, bara, creation; Radah, rule; and Mishta, feast. This is going to be a wild ride. And each one of these places is going to correspond to something that needs to happen in those places, and some force of antagonism that you have in each place. So you can think of it also this way. You can think of it as garden, that's creation; land, that is rule; and underworld, which is going to be associated with the mouth or with eating. So that's why I put the word feast there. And it's always a question: who's going to be feasting? Is it going to be you, or is it going to be the Leviathan? So I kind of think of the monster now as having these three components. The three components. Um, the snake, which is what you find up here in the garden, is kind of like this little bait that the Leviathan has. It's the little piece that it uses when it's not on its home turf. If you think of the underworld as the home turf of the Leviathan, and the Leviathan just really is anything that wants to eat you. So if it's in a sports movie, of course, the Leviathan is going to be the New York Yankees, or it's going to be the biggest, baddest, most powerful sports team out there. In ancient stories, you might find the empires would be representative of the Leviathan. So you might say Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, Assyria, and then that's also associated with the waters. This idea of the flood of overtaking you when your city gets sacked by the Babylonians. That's like a flood overtaking your walls, and Leviathan is eating you. And then you wind up in the stomach of the Leviathan, like Daniel. Daniel is in Babylon, and he's a little tiny minnow, but he's in Babylon. So he's down here in the underworld. So you can think of it that way: garden, land, sea, and then you've got snake, uh, giant or beast, and Leviathan. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to put this all together, and I really think it does make sense. I've been thinking about it a lot. Okay, so um, now you could think of it also in terms of one organism. So you can think of head, body, and bowels. So you've got the garden is associated with the head, the giant or the beast on the land is associated with the body, and then the Leviathan down here in the underworld is associated with the mouth or the bowels, or going through the mouth down into the bowels. Something along those lines. So the snake in the garden. Let's talk about that first. Oh, by the way, you can see this in ancient cosmological artistic renderings of something like this, where you've got the fresh water, the headwaters, kind of like this river, this waterfall up here is fresh, pure water, and the snake goes in there to poison the well. It goes in there to try to change, divert the course of that water somehow. And then you've got maybe lakes on the dry land, or rivers, and then you've got the sea, the salty sea. So it goes from fresh to salty as you go from pure idea realm down into the realm of the digestive system is the salt water. Um, so you can see here it's kind of represented with this. You've got your fountains up here, a fountain up above, and then some kind of a city, habitable order, garden, safe place at the top of this mountain. And then notice the snake here around the garden. That's going to be an important part of this story. And then the snake below. So these two snakes are connected, I want to say. Kind of like this Leviathan, this fish that has the little the bait, or the those little fish that kind of sit on the bottom of the ocean but they dangle out a little. They have like a tongue that looks like a worm, and that lures in the fish so that they can eat it.
A biological lure known as an esker protrudes from its forehead. Resembling a wriggling worm, it tempts prey from the safety of cover.
It's something like that. Your snake up here in the garden is trying to get you out of paradise down onto land, and then the giant is trying to get you from land into the underworld. In a sense, the monsters are pulling you down and down and down, and then you have a certain task, not a certain task, but a certain strategy against each one of those three. And so that's what we're going to look at. All right. So first, let's talk about the snake. So the snake, you could say, is not on its home turf. The snake has to be crafty. It has to be subtle. It has to be underhanded. And it needs to kind of like whisper to you and try to get you to change your mind. So because it doesn't have power over you when you're in the garden. You can think of the garden as when you're at home and you're inside your house and everything has been made baby proof, and you're a small child in that world. So somebody, some guardian, some parent, some higher figure has made that world safe for you, and they're the ones who are keeping the giants and the leviathans away, you might say. They are guarding that garden for you. And so it's safe for you, and everything is good to eat. When you open up that refrigerator and you look in there, you're going to have fruit that is good to eat. The idea of fruit is that fruit is a type of food that you do not need to kill. You don't need to do any violence in order for it. It just gives itself. The tree offers up the fruit to you. So that's the notion of the garden. Is it's an area of peace and shalom where nourishment is just given away. It's not, you don't need to take it by force. You don't need to kill out and kill something or harvest something. It's just offering itself to you. That's the idea, the symbolism there. And so the snake needs to change the way you hear things. So you can think of the snake as associated with hearing, and then the Leviathan is associated with eating. So it's like ears and mouth. And each one of them is going to have a certain value at stake. In the snake, it's who are you going to listen to? Which advice are you going to listen to? Which direction are you going to go in? With the body, it's going to be who's going to rule you. Are you going to rule it, or is it going to rule you? And then in the Leviathan, I know it sounds weird to say, but it's going to be who's going to be eating. Is it going to eat you, or are you going to eat it? Now I know that sounds funny, but it's absolutely true in the world of story. It's absolutely true. Okay. So again, let's talk about now this snake that is the ring around the garden. Now this is something that I've gotten from some Orthodox theologians. I'm not making a claim one way or another, a theological claim here, but there is one theory out there that says that the snake in the garden in Genesis is a seraphim. And you remember the songs, cherubim and seraphim falling down before me. You see this in the hymnology, the idea of the cherubim and the seraphim. Now, what is a seraphim? So according to these guys, according to these theologians, a seraphim is, when you see King Tut, you'll see a little snake on his headdress, and then kind of like the wings of a cobra, or the trappings of a cobra behind it. So it's a winged serpent is the imagery there. And what is the job of the seraphim? The seraphim, if you look in, let's, for example, the book of Isaiah or different other places in the Old Testament or in Egyptian, ancient Near Eastern kingly courts, the seraphim is a guard. So it's guarding that safe space. It's guarding that sanctuary. So the idea is that this seraphim, which is called a serpent in Genesis, is supposed to be guarding this safe space where the Adam and the Eve have been put, where the human has been put. But rather than guarding, it wants to give knowledge of the outside world, which is land and sea, to these innocent childlike figures. So the parallel would be, let's say someone comes into your house and then starts exposing your children to something that they can't understand or handle. It'd be like, showing them a horror movie, or, showing them some version of evil that they're not capable cognitively to understand. Now, if you could think of it that way, or you could think of it even more simple than that. I remember one time when my niece was about 2 years old and we were camping, and she kept sticking her finger in this rusty door for the bear box. And I was trying to explain using logic. And I said, listen, you can't stick your finger in there, otherwise you'll get pinched. But she kept doing it. Why? Well, it's because she doesn't understand if then. Children do not develop the notion of consequential one action leading to another action until their brains have developed to a certain point. We know that, right? So my brother said she doesn't understand that. Here's what she understands. No, don't stick your finger in there. So that's the idea, that the rules within the garden have to be simple and black and white. Do this, don't do that, because the cognitive abilities of the childlike figures they're not ready yet to understand, let's say, the bad things out there or the evil out there. She doesn't understand the notion of getting your finger pinched. She doesn't understand perhaps the notion of burning your hand if you stick it in the fire. So she needs black and white ritualistic rules. Ritual. Follow this. Wax on, wax off.
First, wash all the car. Wax.
Wait, what do I have to wash all the car?
No question.
Yeah, but
Right. Wax on, wax off. Don't forget to breathe. Very important.
And then it's like, well, Mr. Miyagi saying to Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. And then Karate Kid says, well, I don't want to do that. I don't understand why I have to do that.
Shit, I'm going home, man.
Daniel-san!
Only later, when he's ready, will he understand why wax on, wax off works for him learning karate.
Show me wax on, wax off. Yes! That's!
So there's a certain element of trust, and that's why it's associated with the ear. And so this is what you would say, like if you look at the early parts of the Bible, it's hear, listen, hear, listen, follow these rules. No explanation. It's just listen. Who are you going to listen to? And so that's the priestly task, the ritualistic task, the idea of here's some higher wisdom that we've received from above. And again, like if you're thinking of my niece as the one in the garden, and me, the higher wisdom, the older mature person that knows good and evil, saying, don't stick your finger in that hinge on that box. That's what it's like. Okay. So the snake would be someone who says, I want to give this child something they're not ready for. Why? That's the question, isn't it? Why would someone want to do that, or some being want to do that? Well, it's to get you down here eventually. That's what I want to say, that the idea is that the snake is a spy, or perhaps a little extension of Leviathan, to try to get you down into the world of digestion, because it wants to eat you, wants to consume you. It wants to be the one that you become the body of it, something like that. And so you developing like a little seedling or a little sapling or a little infant, developing a different identity than it has, like like Daniel in Babylon. It's like he's a Hebrew, they're Babylonians. They don't want him to be a Hebrew. They want to digest him and him to become just part of the Babylonian entity, the Babylonian body, something like that. So what they're doing is what you'll notice is of course, in Genesis, you've got the four headwaters. So think of Genesis head, not like head your head, but the origin, the source of the water, the pure, fresh water. That's the idea of the garden. So it wants to poison the well. That's what it wants to do with bad advice. And it's bad advice in the form of advice that you can't process or handle or integrate. That's what it is. So that's what eating from the fruit, eating the wrong fruit, eating the unripe fruit, saying you're not ready for that yet. You're not ready for the knowledge of evil. You have maybe the knowledge of good already, but now the knowledge of evil, you're not ready for that, will cause you to fall out of the garden, because now you're not living in a world where everything is for you and everything offers itself up to you. Now you're living in a world where there's thorns and where there's people, like if you leave your house, let's say think of someone who's like 16 years old or 15 years old and they run away from home. That's what it's like. The prodigal son goes and runs away from home. And now nobody out there cares about you. Now there are actors in the world that are predatory actors. That's the extension of the snake, wants to lure you away from the garden, get you outside of that safe, habitable place so that it can do whatever it wants to do. It's predatory instincts, something like that. Okay. So you can think of it like as well. This is in terms of the dry land and the sea now. Okay, so if the garden is way up above, well, let's start with creation. So with creation, you have Elohim separating the waters, and you have to think of, remember, the sea underworld. That's the digestive system of the universe, of the cosmos. That is where things go to get broken down and decomposed and turned, and all identity, memory, identity, body is broken down to its constituent parts, digested. And out of that comes this dry land, and then on top of that is the safe garden. So the higher up you go, the more holy it is, the more safe it is, the more peace there is, you might say. And the lower down you go, the more conflict there is. First, you're going to encounter the body, the beast, on the land, and then you would eventually encounter the Leviathan down in the underworld. So if you look at this as an icon from, or a painting from, this is a painting about the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. So you've got your Moses and your Israelites here. They're obviously in medieval dress, and then you've got your Egyptians here being swallowed by the sea. So that's the idea here. So just like in creation, the waters parted and dry land arose. So you can think of it like if you're thinking about the crossing of the Red Sea, the crossing of the Jordan, anytime you have a separation of waters and then dry land, that's what it's mimicking, it's mirroring creation. So the idea is that the not so much that the water went away, but that the dry land arose out of the water. This is the sort of description of peace that you'll find in the later, in Isaiah. The dry land arises out of the water, and then they can go onto the dry land. And meanwhile, the Egyptians get digested by the waters. So the idea is that that the Israelites went onto dry land, and now they're trying to get from they were in the belly of Leviathan, you would say, like in Egypt, like Jonah in the belly of the whale, and then the plagues gave it indigestion, gave the Leviathan indigestion, and they were vomited out, and they crossed the Red Sea, and now they're out of Leviathan, you might say. They've been vomited out, just like Jonah was vomited out up on the seashore. And now they're going to go and try to get to higher and higher ground. So they're going to go through the wilderness, and they're eventually trying to get to the promised land. And you have to think of those as levels up. They're trying to go back, get back to the garden, go back towards the east where the sun rises, and get to the garden. So I hope all this is making sense. All right, so that's the head. That's the snake. I'm gonna get through all of this, and then I'm gonna look at the movie at Hoosiers. So that's the idea. Is the snake tempts you to eat the fruit, then you get somehow booted out of the garden, or you just leave the garden on your own will, something like that, and you're now in the realm of body or dry land. That's the realm of the beast of the giants. So if you think of Cain and Abel, that's now the next battle. So the first battle was between Adam and the snake. Now this next battle is between Cain and what? The beast. And if you don't believe me, then you can look it up. You'll see that the beast is crouching at your door and it wants to rule you. It wants to rule you. So think of it this way. So remember I said, who are you in the garden is who are you going to listen to? What advice are you going to take? And the snake is trying to poison the well and trying to get you to take the wrong advice, which is going to lead you away from safety into this world where you're vulnerable. Why? Because there's predators out there and there's nobody looking out for you anymore. No higher authority looking out for you anymore. You're on your own. That's the idea. When you run away from home, you're on your own. It's like there's nobody looking out for you. So that's the idea. So the question is it going to rule you or are you going to rule it? This is now, we've moved from you might say the priestly realm to the kingly realm. And you can see this order in the Bible. The priestly books are going to be the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and then the kingly books are going to be First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, and then the prophetic is going to be the prophetic works: Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Isaiah, Jeremiah. So it's going from garden to land to sea in a larger sense, but it's a fractal. So each person will go through those three stages as well and fight those three versions of the monster as well, you might say. Okay, so I hope this isn't making sense. So now the question is, are you going to be killed or ruled by the beast, the giant, or is it going to rule you? So that's the very first thing that happens. Now this is a fascinating painting that I found. This is from a Russian Orthodox church, a fresco. I couldn't even find who made it or what. I just found it online. But look at this. Notice he's got the jawbone here. That's going to be the idea of using the part of an animal to kill somebody. And then he's got this beast right behind him here, right? So the idea is that he is now embodying the will of the beast. And so now Cain is going to do the bidding of this beast. Now, Father Stephen DeYoung, Orthodox priest, claims that if you look at the text in Genesis, it says sin is crouching at your door. That's what Yahweh says to Cain. And the word crouching is an older word than Hebrew, apparently. It's an old Akkadian word for a demon that climbs up through the cracks of the earth. That's notion of crouching. And so when people, you'll find in art and iconography, putting sin as a beast, that's what it's kind of like. That's the tradition that it's drawing from. So the idea is that this beast climbs up from under here somewhere even deeper to the realm of chaos, and wants to rule you and wants to make you do what it wants. So you could think of it like, if you are possessed by the spirit of anger, if you allow that to possess you, you're manifesting the will of that spirit. You are not acting on your own accord now. You're being ruled. And so the lesson here is that you have to kill the beast. You have to rule the beast. So that's the kingly realm. That's the next realm. You've got to rule it. Okay, so that's the idea of, we've gone through head and the snake, body and the giant or the beast, and now the underworld, the sea. Now, those of you that have watched my previous Overcoming the Monster videos, you'll remember that we talked about this mouth of the Leviathan. So the Leviathan is, it can be a snake, it can be a dragon, it can be a fish, it could be a whale, it could be a shark. or it could be an empire, or it could be the New York Yankees, like I said, like the biggest, baddest team. But whatever it is, the one thing it has in common is that it lives in the realm of chaos, or at least far, far, far away from where you're familiar with. It's outside of the realm of your knowledge. That's a good way. So chaos isn't necessarily an absolute term. It's chaos relative to what your knowledge is. So it's like the farther away from home you go, the more chaotic it's going to feel. If I go into another country and they're all speaking a different language and they all have different customs and they all drive on the different side of the road or whatever it is, I'm in chaos at that point. And so there's a sense that at the farther away I go, the more vulnerable I am to being swallowed by this chaos monster. So if you failed and you listened to the snake and you got knowledge of good and evil that kicked you out of the garden, and then you failed and you didn't kill the beast, and the beast is now ruling you, what's going to happen next? You're going to wind up falling into chaos. You can see this with Alcoholics Anonymous. You can see this with addiction. All of these different things of like, you're just falling farther and farther and farther away from life. You might say from that fresh water. You're going from the fresh water into the salty water. You're going from the water that nourishes you, that replenishes you, that is good for you, and into the salt water that's going to kill you, the salt water that's going to just break you down. Just think of how salt water corrodes everything. It's like salt water will corrode your car. Everybody whose car is near the ocean, it's going to be rusty and corroded, right? That there's a sense of the farther away you get from the garden, the more everything is broken down, the more everything is decaying. And so anything to do with decay, with breaking down the body, with loss of memory, with diseases or little entities that will dissolve you away, that's what the Leviathan represents. So that's why you can have fire. You could go into the mouth of the Leviathan, and there could be fire inside or acid inside, anything that's going to basically dissolve you. And so that's why in your traditional religious iconography, you're going to find that the mouth of hell is an entrance, a portal to some kind of a compost pile, some kind of a place where everything is broken down, and you're dissolved away. And now we've seen this, of course, in earlier videos when we looked at the transparency of characters that go into the underworld and how they'll start to lose their shape or their form. You could think of it in terms of the ghost world as well. It's kind of like it's more and more shadowy and more and more shadowy. It's like you're being dissolved away. Okay, so remember up here in the head, it's who are you going to listen to? What kind of advice are you going to have? And then down here in the realm of the land or the body, it's going to be who's going to rule. Are you going to rule, or is the beast going to rule you? And then down here in the underworld, it's who's going to be eaten. Are you going to be eaten by it? Or, and here's the weird part, are you going to eat it? Now, you probably don't believe me, but this is absolutely true in stories. Here's a passage, Psalm 74:14. You, meaning Yahweh, break the heads of Leviathan in pieces and give him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. What in the world? But okay, so in order to understand this, you have to realize that the ancient mythologies would have the creator, the sky god, or in the Hebrew and Christian tradition, it's God, it's Elohim, it's Yahweh. That, remember, I said that the creating order out of chaos, dividing the waters, is some kind of making the world out of the body of this giant fish, something like that. So there's a sense that you go in to the belly of Leviathan. Let's go back to Jonah here. You go into the belly of Leviathan like Jonah, and then you're going to pull the nutrition out of the belly of Leviathan. So this is a very, for me, it's a fascinating topic, but it's a little bit difficult to understand. So think of a seed. Okay, if the world, the sea, the underworld, is like the bottom of reality, and that is where digestion happens. That's the bowels of reality, the bowels of the cosmos. That's the same thing as in the earth, the soil. So all of the leaves that are broken down, all of the organic matter that's put into the soil, like in the Central Valley here in California, whatever you want to, whatever metaphor or place you want to use, that's where nutrition is. So that is where you kind of have to go in order for something new to sprout up. So Yahweh does it. Let's go back to our slides here. Yahweh does it when he separates the waters in the beginning of creation to create the dry land and then create the garden. He's doing it out of what? The Hebrew phrase is tohu wabohu. Robert Alter translates that as welter and waste. Formless and void is the King James. Formless and void, chaos. So down here in the root structure of reality, and I've talked about this before in the voyage and return plot type, down here, that's where nutrition is. And so in order for something to grow up out of it, out of the water or out of the soil, like a tree growing up out of the ground, you have to eat the nutrition that's found in the soil. So you have to gather in the multiplicity, call it into a higher purpose, and then it goes into the root structure, and then it comes up and it forms this garden. And then at the top, it forms fruit. So it's this upward movement. So you've got the upward downward movement from the garden to land to sea, or you could say like in a tree, it's like fruit, trunk, root system, something like that. Or in a person, it's like head, body, bowels, or digestive system. Now, this is going to sound a little weird, but what else is down here? If you're thinking of a body, what else is down here with all of the digestive stuff? The reproductive system. So the idea of a seed going down into the earth and then sort of germinating and going up. All right, so a seed going into the underworld. What does that remind you of? There's the Greek mythology of going down into Hades. Of course, there's Jonah, and then there's the herring of hell with Christ. There's a sense of the hero going down. Now, what is remember I said the mouth and speaking. That's logos, word, logos. If you read the book of John, in the beginning was the Word. Where was the Word? Was it down here in the tohu wabohu, in the chaos? Darkness was over the face of the deep is how Genesis opens. And then we know from John, the Word, the logos, was there. Where? Was it up here? Or was it down here? I'm going to say to you, I think it was down here, and it gathers in the multiplicity and brings it up like a tree, or raises the dry ground out of the sea. It's something like that. So the hero needs to go there into the underworld in order for new life to grow. In order for new life to grow, you have to go in here and you have to start eating Leviathan from the inside. And then out of Leviathan is going to sprout a tree. Something like that. Let's watch now a scene from season 2 of The Mandalorian.
I don't think it's dead.
Me either. I've got an idea. Get it? Sorry, I didn't have time to explain.
I hope our paths cross again.
Okay, so see what I mean. All right, Mando. Okay, that's Leviathan. Of course, it's a sand monster. It's in the Star Wars world, but for all intents and purposes, that sand is the underworld. That Leviathan is down there underneath reality. And what does Mando have to do? He goes into the mouth of the Leviathan and the belly of the beast, and then he cuts it open from the inside. And then everybody starts having a barbecue. And so what is that? It's this, right? It's breaking the head of Leviathan in pieces and giving him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Very profound. Okay, so you're probably thinking, how in the world is he going to relate this to a sports movie? All right, so let's go back to the three realms. Okay, so in your sports movie, in your typical sports movie, you're going to have a garden creation scene or area. And what is going to be the distinctive of that? I think what it is basically you need a proper telos, a proper orientation, a proper direction. And the coach is usually the one who finds it. Now in Moneyball, it's going to be Billy Bean is looking for that proper telos.
I need more money, Steve.
You found Jason. You found Damon. Billy.
I need more money.
We don't have any
I
more
can't
money,
compete
Billy.
against
We're
120
not going to
million.
compete with these teams that have big budgets. We're not going to pay $17 million a year to players.
I'm not asking you for tens of 20, 30 million dollars. I'm just asking you for a little bit of help, and I will get you that championship team.
Find replacements for the guys we lost with the money that we do have.
I can't leave here with that.
What else can I help you with?
He's losing, and he wants to know, how can we win? With the resources that we have, how can we win? So what's the telos? Winning the World Series. In Hoosiers, what you're going to see is Gene Hackman shows up into town, and it's the same sort of thing. A town that identifies as with basketball, but they haven't won anything. It's a high school town. There's a scene we're going to show right now.
7 players, that it?
I don't count. I'm too short. I'm not no good.
I thought everybody in Indiana played basketball.
We only got 64 boys in the whole school. Most do, but not all go out for the team.
It's gonna be a lonely bench.
The players are saying, yes, our identity is basketball, but not everybody goes out for the team, and we don't have very many people, and so therefore we only have 5.5 players. Something like that. Okay, so Gene Hackman's job is up here in the beginning part, in the bara, in the creation part, is to plot the telos and keep the water fresh, keep the water pure. So he doesn't want anyone to go in there, a snake, to poison the well, to taint his direction. Okay, so now let's watch a scene where he starts to encounter let's say, the snakes that are in the garden.
Tell me, do you believe in man-to-man or a zone defense?
Zone defense is all we've played in the past, and it's the only thing that'll work this year.
All right, so the first thing there was, remember, this is the priestly, when you're talking about the garden, the first phase of the story, that's the priestly task. That's the priestly calling. It's finding the right direction, finding the telos, and then establishing the rituals in order to get you there. So finding the telos, establishing the rituals. Okay, that's the priestly task. Finding the telos, establishing the rituals. So what's happened? Gene Hackman thinks it's funny. You know, the priest, the pastor, says, you know, we hope that you know, you'll be with our boys, et cetera, et cetera. Tell me, do you believe in zone defense? Okay, what's that? Okay, that's the snake saying, don't you want to go with zone defense? Isn't that the way you want to go? So your main serpent figure here is going to be George, the character George. He is the one running the practices in interim while they're looking for another coach. Okay, so he basically is the one who, in the context of this story, is the snake who wants to poison the well. He wants to change the direction, the telos. Now, what Gene Hackman knows, now any good priest will know this. If the priest is truly in touch with the higher wisdom, they will know when something is the right direction and when it is the wrong direction. That's the calling of the priest, you might say. This is the Gandalf figure, and in this case, when your priest is your protagonist, okay, he's the Adam. He is in the garden. He's been put in the garden. He's been placed in the garden, and he now needs to keep the water fresh. So what do you do? And again, remember how I said, each one of these monsters, each one of these forces of antagonism, these antagonistic figures have a certain strategy that you need to employ when you deal with them. So what do you do with a snake? That's the question. What do you do with the snake? Now, ultimately, you might say on some higher symbolic level, I'm making the case that the snake is this little light here, this little piece of bait for Leviathan. Okay, but he doesn't know that. He in a sense is being controlled by something. He's trying to poison the well, but it's not because he wants the team to lose. But in some sense, Leviathan is whispering in his ear, and now he's whispering in the ear of the coach. Something like that. Oftentimes that's how it goes. The snake is supposed to be guarding. It's supposed to be the seraphim that guards the garden, but instead he's letting in, let's say, the salt water, the wrong direction, something like that. Or you could say that maybe the well was poisoned in the past. I mean, in the context of this movie, zone defense is not the right way. That's not the gospel. Zone defense is the anti-gospel, you could say. And so at some point in the past, they believe the wrong thing. So again, the priestly, the garden, it's about faith, it's about belief, it's about ritual, it's about who you are listening to, what authority are you going, and are you aiming at the telos correctly? What's the telos? It's to win the championship. In Moneyball, it's to win the World Series. Now in Moneyball, you might say that the snake is very similar. Let's watch the scene from Moneyball right now, the famous scene with the coaches.
He's got a beautiful swing, right, Barry?
The ball explodes off his bat.
He connects it, he drives it apart.
A lot of pop coming off the bat.
He's noticeable. Got an ugly girlfriend. Ugly girlfriend means no confidence.
Okay. The problem we're trying to solve is that there are rich teams, and then there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us. It's an unfair game.
Okay, so see, same thing. It's like, okay, we're not concerned with winning. We're concerned with, does he have a girlfriend? You know, does he pass the eye test? You know, the eye test. The serpent says, "Hey, look at the fruit. Look, it looks good to the eye. Why don't you just eat it?" You know. But the priest, the task of the priest, the task of the Adam being placed in the garden is to keep the knowledge pure, keep the water pure. So, what do you do with the snake? You got to boot him out of the garden. You got to exile the snake. So you can think of it this way. It's like either you exile the snake or the snake will exile you. Either you exile the snake or the snake will get you exiled. Maybe that's the snake will get you kicked out. That's what happens in Genesis, right? They go for the fruit, they go for the wrong thing, and then they get booted out of the garden. So now let's watch the scene with Gene Hackman where the snake tries to get him booted.
I was hired to teach the boys the game of basketball, and I did that to the best of my ability. I apologize for nothing. I'm very proud of these boys.
Coach is dismissed.
I think we should vote again.
All those in favor of the coach staying.
Coach stays.
All right, so I love this movie. All the coach stays. I think we should vote again. So basically that's a scene where our snake figure here, the one who's supposed to be guarding the boys and training them in the religion of basketball, is the one who's trying to boot our Adam figure, our true priest, you might say, out of the garden, and get him kicked out as coach so he can take over. So this is what's interesting about sports movies. And generally, I'm just going to say sports movies. I'm going to say all movies, although I'm tempted to. Your movie will have a religion. Your movie will have a religion, and your movie will have priests, and you're going to have a false priest and a real priest, oftentimes. In this movie, what's the religion? Well, it's the religion of basketball. He said, Gene Hackman says in his impassioned speech, "I came here to teach the boys the game of basketball." And you'll see this over and over. Let's look at a couple more scenes here.
You know, most people would kill to be treated like a god just for a few moments.
I've seen them, the real sad ones. They sit around the rest of their lives talking about the glory days when they were 17 years old. Gods come pretty cheap nowadays, don't they? I mean, you become one by putting a leather ball in an iron hoop. Yeah, but it's only a game.
Why so unfriendly, Miss Fleener?
Just stay away from Jimmy. I don't want him coaching in Hickory when he's 50.
That's a hell of a team you had there.
Did you know about it?
I know everything there is to know about the greatest game ever invented. You're playing Cedar Knob tomorrow. I've been watching how you've been breaking the Colts. But my friend, Cedar Knob, a bunch of mites. Run you off the boards. Watch that purgatory they call a gym. No drive, 12 foot in. That'll do.
Okay, so very interesting. So people are talking about being a god and the glory days of the high school basketball and the greatest game ever invented. And everybody's trying to navigate, you might say, this relationship between instrumental goods and ultimate goods, between idolatry and true religion. There's a sense that Gene Hackman is the lesson that we have to learn here is that it's through basketball that you get to real worth in the world and life. It is if basketball, like she says, is the end all and be all, and you're just going to be looking back at your glory days, then it's an idol. But if you can somehow, in a Dantean way, like Dante uses Virgil to go up and ascend into the heavens, that's the journey that we're kind of going on here. And so Gene Hackman needs to keep the gospel, so to speak, of basketball, or the way, I don't know exactly what words to use here, but like the purity of the message clean. Okay, so I ask you the question, what do you do with a snake? Now, here's what you do.
Up there. You can't score if you don't shoot. Shoot from outside. Quit throwing it around. Get it in the hole.
I thought we'd go 20 minutes on, 10 off, and 20 on. And we'll ease into it real slow.
Well, first of all, okay, my name is Norm. Secondly, your coaching days are over.
I don't know why Cletus drug your tired old bones in here. He must have owed you something fierce.
Leave the ball, will you, George? Thank you.
Okay, so remember what we said. Up in the head, it's who are you going to listen to? Which form of religion are you going to follow? Is it going to be the wrong way, or is it going to be the right way? Okay, in this case, zone defense, that's the wrong way. And the right way is what we'll see in a moment here is pass 4 times before you shoot. This movie's version of wax on, wax off is pass 4 times before you shoot. Okay, and now you're going to deal with basically the body. So we move from the headwaters, or the ideal world, down into now the body. Now you have to think of body as it's all of the parts of the team need to form a body. So you've got different and this is the naming of the animals portion of Genesis, or the putting things in order portion, where you got to find the right roles for the right people, and then you've got to impart that wisdom, even though you're the one who's the head, you're the coach. Gene Hackman is the coach, you're protagonist. And now the body are going to be these unruly parts. And the question is, are you going to kill that little beast, just like you exiled the serpent? You got to kill the beast in some sense and rule it. So he has to be the one in charge in order to rule properly. So in order for him to be, let's say, a just king, the ancient concept of justice was to put things in their proper place. So you think of the ancient concept of justice is the person who plays shortstop is the best shortstop. The person who plays center field is the best center field. That's the idea, is that everybody kind of like their worthiness and competency and abilities are matched to their role in society, or their role in the team, or their role in the body. That's justice, okay? That's the ancient idea of justice. So what he needs to do is these giants are going to start to pop up, these beasts, or like the Hebrew word, the little demon that crawls up from the cracks that wants to have its way. Okay, so now you're out of the garden. You've gotten that pure. You've gotten the direction right. But now you need to kind of like get that, you got to implement it in reality. So this is the idea of building a kingdom. So that's why, in the Bible, you have the priestly books are all about the law, the Torah, the way, the 10 Commandments. Then you move into the kingly phase, which is David and Solomon, which is now they're taking that and they're trying to build a safe, just, livable, workable, peaceful realm. That's the idea. So that you can go out and accomplish whatever the telos is that you're supposed to accomplish, in this case, which is to win the championship. Okay, so now let's look at some manifestations of the beast in our conflict here. So remember, pass 4 times before you shoot. That's the ritual, okay? But the ritual is not understood by the body. Why? Because the body is just the body. They're not the head. So the body needs to be in subjugation to the head. So the body has to do, so it's the same thing in your life. It's like, I know that tomorrow I've got to work, and so I can't stay up all night drinking wine. My body might want to. There's the famous, a great little bit by Jerry Seinfeld.
I stay up late at night because I'm night guy. What about getting up after 5 hours sleep? Oh, that's morning guy's problem. So you get up in the morning, you're alarm, you hate that night guy. See, night guy always screws morning guy. There's nothing morning guy can do.
So Jerry Seinfeld says, that's night guy's problem. I'm night guy, What about going to bed? No, that's morning guy's problem. Okay, so that's the idea here, is that you're divided. And the head can rule over those, what would you say, sub-personalities within you that are at war. So night guy and morning guy need to be told, okay, night guy, you got to go to bed because otherwise you're screwing over morning guy, something like that. So when you're the head of your own self, you have to rule your passions, or you have to rule the beasts, the animals, the beasts, the competing instincts and drives and goals. Because why? You know the higher telos. You've been up there, up here, up on the mountain where you have perspective, and you can see, okay, we need to get to there. All right. So morning guy, you get up early. Night guy, you go to bed. Right? It's something like that. Okay. So now let's watch the scene where he has to start dealing with the beast.
Their move! Just move, right? What's a good shot? Set up your defense! Pass the ball in! Shoot it! Christ's sake, let's let him run and shoot me over! I don't want anybody in this locker room at halftime.
I'm trying hard to believe that you know what you're doing.
I know what I'm doing.
Okay, so here we have our first basketball game. We've had the practices, so you might say that the rituals have been passed down, but now we're in the phase of land. Now we're out of the garden and we're in conflict. We're experiencing the games. And what's going to happen is that there will be little sub-personalities, little beasts that are going to want to say, I want to do it my way. And they're not in touch. The beast is not in touch with the higher wisdom. The beast is all body and no head, you might say. So he's going to have to sacrifice one of these little beasts in order to, you might say, assert his authority, to establish his kingship, to establish his rule. Okay, so here's what happens. At first, of course, he says, okay, pass 4 times. He's telling him to pass 4 times. He's telling him the law, you might say. He's telling him the rituals. But it's not working right away. And that's often true. You'll see this in Moneyball as well. You'll see it in other sports movies, Karate Kid. It's like, I did what you said. The body is going to say to the head, the players to the coach, I did what you said, but it's not working. So they're going to be what? They're going to be tempted to start taking over and ruling on their own. So there's this idea that you have to, okay, if you have the higher wisdom, you have the longer view, you have the more maturity. The coach has more maturity than the players. And so the job of the coach is to rule properly. So we've moved maybe from the ritualistic priestly realm now into the realm of the sword. So now he's got to lay down the law. That's another phrase that we use. Lay down the law. You have to follow this law. You know, we've established the purity of the law, the rightness of the law in the earlier section. Now you need to follow it. Okay. So what happens is it's not working. All right.
You guys remember what we worked on in practice, all right? How many times are we going to pass before we shoot? 4. 4! Set it up! Set it up! Ray! Ray! Pass the ball! Ollie, going for Ray.
Okay, and Ray comes in. Ray decides he's going to be the one to rule. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to pass it 4 times. Gene Hackman is yelling at him. How many times are you going to pass it? How many times are you pass it? 4 times, right? And he defies that authority. He goes against that authority, and he starts shooting it right away because he wants the glory now. Okay, this is another theme that you're going to find here is when do you get the proper, when is it time for glory and celebration, and when is it time for work? That's basically the main temptation here is I want the glory now. I don't want to plant the seed, build the skills, wait for the tree to grow, and then the fruit will come, will blossom. The flowers will blossom. That's let's say that's the proper order. To plant the seed, build the skills, allow the tree to grow, and then have the fruit. Instead, it's like, I want the fruit now, you know, or it's like Jacob and Esau. You know, Jacob is the hairy brother, and he's the red and ruddy brother. The word red in Hebrew, it's like has to do with the animal. He's the hunter. And what does he do? He sells his birthright for a bowl of soup. That's the beast right there. That's what the beast does. The body, the instinctual night guy, they cannot sacrifice the present for the future, you could say. Okay, so that's Ray will not sacrifice. He wants the glory now. He wants to be the one that the crowd loves, and they're cheering him, right? So Gene Hackman knows what he's doing. He just said it to his buddy in the locker room. I know what I'm doing. And the other guy says, well, I sure hope so. But that's the role of the priest. The priest has to go up there, and if you did this first part right and you do know what you're doing, now you have to enforce it when you get down onto the land. So now let's see what happens.
25.
Where are you going?
In the game.
Sit down.
What do you mean? We gotta have 5 out there.
Sit down. Sit.
Coach, need one more.
My team's on the floor. What are you trying to do?
All right. So basically, one of the other players fouls out, and so Ray, number 25, says, 25, going into the game, and he says, sit down. And he holds his coaching, his scepter, you might say. Okay, I got the authority here. I got the wisdom from above. I've got the authority. You have to do, you might not understand it because you're night guy. You know, I understand night guy and morning guy. I understand the long game. I understand, you know, and so he has to lay down the law. And so they wind up doing the game with only 4 people on the floor. And he benches him for the rest of the game to properly punish him. So that's the sacrifice here. That's sacrificing the beast, saying, okay, we have to kill off that subpersonality. We have to kill off that instinct in order for us to function as a proper body in the world of conflict on land. So it's something like that. Now notice our introduction of the Dennis Hopper character here, who does a brilliant job in the movie, and he sees something, he smiles. Everyone else is upset. because they're the body. They're the grumbling Israelites, and they're upset at Moses, something like that. They want to go back to Egypt. It's like they want to go back to being a basketball team that has fun, and they get the glory in their little local high school, but they're not the kind that go to the state championship. What Gene Hackman wants is to form them into a body that will go out and conquer the world. That's what he wants. He has a higher goal, you could say. So he needs to kill off these lower level ones, needs to kind of trim the weeds, prune the tree, whatever metaphor you want to use. You've got to kill off those lower ones so that you can achieve the higher. And Dennis Hopper here recognizes that. So he sort of sees, okay, this is a true priest here, or a true king. This is somebody who is worthy of this role of coach, you might say. Okay. So now we have another layer of this phase of the movie, the land phase, before we get to the sea and Leviathan phase. And that is that Dennis Hopper himself is dealing with a beast, and that is alcoholism. Okay. And so you'll notice Gene Hackman has to go through, as he's becoming a proper coach, not only is he subjugating the players and forming them into a efficient, cohesive, competent body, he's helping the assistant coach figure, Dennis Hopper, deal with his demons, you might say, with his beast. So let's take a look at that scene.
Cletus, my friend, my good friend.
River shooter, Fletch.
Coach, sectionals at 33. Cleet, you tell him. 1 point down. 2, 1, let her fly. In and out. Yeah, well.
Get you some beat.
Give it up.
Sorry, Everett.
I'm my friend of years.
Okay, so that's the brilliant Dennis Hopper character. He's a drunk. He's an alcoholic. Now, remember what I said is that each one of these, there's a certain way of dealing with that force of antagonism. With the snake, what do? You kick it out, okay? With the body, with the giant or with the beast, what do? You rule it. You rule it. So with the snake, you kick it out. You need those waters to be pure. On land, you rule, you subjugate the body. And so you can see here that just like we had a proper coach and an improper coach, remember we had Gene Hackman versus our imposter, our snake here. And now we have a proper king and an improper king. So he is not ruling. He is in touch with the higher wisdom of basketball. We'll learn that throughout the film. He does know how to coach. He does know the game situations he's got ahead for the game. But he wastes his potential, you could say, with alcoholism. So he is not properly ruled. He does not have his head and body in proper alignment. And so what Gene Hackman is going to do is going to say, you need to kill this little lamb. You need to sacrifice your alcoholism if you want to have the higher, if you want to be my assistant coach. Okay, so let's watch that scene.
What you doing out here? We're playing Verdi tonight. What time?
This is my domicile here.
This is it, huh?
Yeah. You want a little snort?
No, thanks. I've got a proposition for you. I want you to give me a hand. I want you to be my assistant.
Me? You want me?
Under the following conditions. That you show up at the games on time.
Well, I got myself a suit. I got a wing dinger. I was married in that suit.
And that you're sober.
Oh, no. What has my drinking got to do with my knowledge about basketball?
If I smell even a trace of liquor on your breath, you'll be finished. You're embarrassing your son.
I'd like you to leave. I'd like you to leave now.
Nice shot, Ray. Let's get him now. More pressure on the ball. Real patient on the offense. Shooter here is going to be one of our assistants. You got anything you want to...
So we had the improper coach and the proper coach, and now we have the improper king and the proper king. And so this is kind of like how it works. The person in charge, the one who had the priestly role, now he's in the kingly role. He needs to rule the beast. He's doing that with the players, and now he's giving a call to Dennis Hopper. You can ascend to a higher place, a place of dignity and a place of celebration. But you got to kill the beast. You got to rule the beast. You got to rule your passions. You got to sacrifice that short-term feeling good, short-term what a drink will give you for this other thing. And he, once again, he has to lay down the law. He goes, if I even smell a hint of it on your breath, you're gone. Just like Ray was gone when he wouldn't pass 4 times. So that's the idea here. He has to establish this kingdom, and he needs to put Dennis Hopper in proper order. Right now he's upside down. His passion, his alcoholism is ruling him. And so he's trying to flip him over, basically. And he's using what? He's using the idea that you can ascend up to glory. You can ascend up to honor and dignity. And he's juxtaposing that with what? Well, you're embarrassing yourself, you're embarrassing your son. So those are the 2 poles, right, in life. You've got glory and honor, and you've got shame and embarrassment. And that's there's a sense that the beast, this is why I really sort of think that the beast and the Leviathan are in cahoots as well, in some sense. The beast wants to rule you and pull you down into the salt water, into the bowel, so eventually you'll get eaten and broken down and decayed. I mean, it's very clear with alcoholism. That's going to disconnect you from your head. It's going to disconnect you from your telos. It's going to disconnect you from your dignity, and you're going to waste away and waste away and waste away. You're going to become more and more beast-like and less human, or less angelic, or less divine-like. That's as you get higher up, you're talking angelic, priestly, divine, and then as you get lower and lower, you're going beast, snake, or fish, digestion. It's kind of some kind of something like that. I don't know if those words are, I don't always know the words to use, but I kind of get the concept. So he's now got a choice. So is he going to keep on this downward path, or is he going to turn his life around? Okay, and so that's what we see. He comes in and reverses the directionality of his life. So rather than going down and down and down into the salt water, into the corrosive part of reality where you're going to eventually wind up dead, that's what alcoholism will do. It'll eventually kill you. Or is he going to start to reverse that order and go higher and higher up?
I'm sure going to the state finals is beyond your wildest dreams, so let's just keep it right there. Forget about the crowds, their fancy uniforms. Focus on the fundamentals and remember what got you here. That we've gone over time and time again. And most important, don't get caught up thinking about winning or losing this game. If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says, at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners. Okay?
So, of course, what happens with competency, and when the body is functioning in a cohesive manner, is that you start to attract more and more talent. So just like Ray was kind of like the rebellious player who didn't understand the higher wisdom, Jimmy is the player who does. Jimmy is the one who saves him in that scene we saw earlier. He says, Coach, he's the best player in the town. And he says, if the coach goes, I don't play.
I don't know if it'll make any change, but I figure it's time for me to start playing ball.
I told you once we got rid of him!
One other thing. I play, coach stays. He goes, I go.
So there's a recognition of proper authority here with the figure of Jimmy that's kind of juxtaposed against Ray. And of course, they start to win. This is typical in all sports movies, and now they're going to have bigger and bigger challenges. And so here we have a scene where they're now starting to go out away from the land, which is not far from the garden. You think of it like local. The farther away you're going to go, like in the Bible, it's like Babylon, Assyria, Egypt. It's farther and farther out.
Incredible and improbable confrontation in the illustrious history of the Indiana High School basketball tournament.
Or Jonah going all the way to Nineveh, or the Apostle Paul going all the way across the waters and winding up in Rome. So there's this idea that you have the logos, which is the seed that's going to grow this tree. And you need to go farther and farther and farther and farther away into death, into the salt water, into the earth, because that's where the tree grows. I guess you could say. You have to go out. You have to go to where the nutrition is. So you have to have these bigger and bigger challenges, something like that, you know. But you're going to see this over and over. The person now we've moved from the priestly role to the kingly role, and now what is it? The prophetic. So then again in the Bible, you got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, that's the priestly. Then you got Kings, Chronicles, Samuel, etc. That's the kingly. And then you have the prophetic, which is, you know, Daniel and Jonah and everything going farther and farther, farther out into the nations or into the waters. You know, that's the idea. So basically, they now have to face the big bad team. That's always what it is. It's like the same thing with Moneyball, the same thing, you know, or it's going to be in Rocky or something. It's going to be the biggest boxer. It's going to be the final monster. They're not having to sneak around like the snake did in the garden. They're not completely headless, you might say, like the giant is on the land. They've got everything going for them, and you're not in your home turf anymore. You know, you're on the away court. And so the challenges are getting bigger, but the glory is getting bigger as well. And as we saw in that speech, he's like, you know, we need to maintain our mission. We need to maintain. We're going into the belly of the beast right now. We're going into the unknown. All these words we have, it's like the unknown, the belly of the beast, the world of chaos, the world where you're not in control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where we're going. So what is the thing that we have to do? We have to keep our orientation pure, like the fresh water up here that we got in the garden, the fundamentals. You know, the fundamentals of the religion of basketball, as long as we keep those. So think of Daniel. Daniel is he is in Babylon. And what does he do? He says, well, I'm going to eat what we ate back home. I'm going to do the rituals that we did back home. I'm not going to do what the Babylonians do. I'm going to do what the Hebrews did. I'm going to maintain my identity, something like that, right? So that's what they do. Say, okay, we just have to do what got us here. That's another sports sort of. Let's just keep doing. So remember the rituals, remember the rules, remember. Okay, so if the head over here was hearing, and then the body over here it's doing, now what is it? Remembering. Or so it's associated with, again, identity, maintaining your identity when you're out there in a place where you could get eaten. You're facing bigger challenges now. You have to, those rules in a way that you learned and that you integrated into your life, they're even more important now that you're so far away from home. Something like that.
Hold this under the backboard. What is it? 15 feet. Strap, put Ollie on your shoulders. Buddy? How far? 10 feet. I think you'll find it's exact same measurements as our gym back in Hickory. Hickory!
That is a brilliant scene. You know, how high is the basket? Oh, it's the same height that we have back home. So again, it's this idea that they're out in this foreign world. They're in danger of being eaten by this thing. And so again, are you going to be eaten, or is it going to eat you? Or is it going to eat you, or are you going to eat it? That's the idea. Like we saw in that clip of The Mandalorian. So again, what do you do with a serpent? You kick it out of the garden, keep the water pure. What do you do with the giant? What do you do with the beast? You subjugate it, you rule it. What do you do with the Leviathan? Well, you eat it from the inside. You go into the belly, and then you start, like Mando, you cutting your way out with a sword or something like that. But you take the logos, you take the seed, and you plant it. That's really, and then the roots will start eating around it. And so you're going to basically take over the Leviathan from the inside. You know, so this is, you can see this in the history, for example, in the history of Christianity. That's exactly what happened to the Roman Empire. If you think of the Roman Empire as the Leviathan, the little Judea, little seed there with their evangelion, and then Paul takes it, takes the seed, takes the logos, plants it in Rome, and then eventually Rome becomes the Holy Roman Empire. Rome becomes transformed from the inside. And now when you go to Europe, when you go to Rome, what are you going to see? You're going to see nothing but Catholic imagery, Catholic art, Catholic buildings, Catholic sensibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a sense that that's what happens. It takes over the Leviathan from the inside, or, it becomes food for this new way, this proper basketball religion, So, okay, now let's watch the scene where they finally go up against Leviathan.
These guys are good. I can't stop that guy. This is embarrassing. Maybe they were right about us. Let's go. Come on. Maybe we don't belong up here. I think Jimmy can take the guy that's guarding him if we set him up.
Okay, so they come up against the championship team. Of course, they can't compete. They're fighting with each other, and they're saying, Gene Hackman says, well, maybe they're right about us. Maybe we don't belong here. What does salt water do? What does digestive juices do? It breaks down the body. It separates all that unity, all that coherency and unity that was cultivated during the kingly period is now getting dissolved again. That's what happens. You're out there in the salt water, and you're going to start fighting with each other. So those parts of the body that were in harmony are now starting to fall apart. And so then Jimmy says, or somebody says about Jimmy, they say, yeah, I think we can set him up. That means they're going to put it so that it's one-on-one between Jimmy and their best player. This is kind of, reminiscent of David and Goliath, where it's like David versus Goliath. It's their best one versus your best one, So it's something like that. Okay. And okay, so let's just fast forward to the end here. Obviously, in every sports movie, what you're going to have is you're going to have the winning of the championship, the final defeating of Leviathan. You're going to kill the giant beast, and then you're going to take the glory. You're going to have the feast at the end. So it's something like that. It's like if you can defeat Leviathan, if you can go in there and plant something that's going to grow, then eventually you're going to have a party. You're going to have a celebration. And that's why, at the end of every movie, there's a celebration, a wedding, a coronation ceremony. All of the honor and glory is going to be there at the end of the cycle. If you planted the flower, if you planted the seed and it grew. So it's something like that. So it's either, it's kind of weird. It's you could almost think of it in terms of truth, goodness, and beauty as well. Like first you have to find the truth, then you have to accomplish goodness in the world, and then it's either going to be ugliness, decay, and you're going to get broken down, or beauty, because there's going to be a flower growing out of that soil, out of that underworld. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Let's go back to the beginning here. So again, I just think that some of these ancient concepts are helpful to know. If you don't know how you want to set up your monster. I'm not saying that every movie goes from snake to giant to Leviathan. I'm not necessarily saying, like, would this map onto Jaws? I think it would. Would it map onto Jurassic Park? I think it would. There's always it's not like, again, I keep saying this every time I'm delving into story and everything. It's not like I'm saying do this formula as if it's a formula. What I'm saying is these are the themes and the notes. This is kind of how stories have done it in the past. This is very deep and resonant within us. And so you can play with those themes. You can start to think, okay, this is basically what a snake does. This is basically what a priest does in opposition to the snake. This is basically what a giant or a beast does. And this is how the king goes against it. And this is basically what a Leviathan does, and this is kind of how the prophet goes against it. Of course, those roles and those things are all tied up with real world religions and real world concepts. And so somebody of you might say, well, that's not what a prophet is, or that's not what a priest is. And I'm not making any kind of theological claim. I'm just saying that I think you can use these categories in the world of story. Think of it in terms of, I'm just going to end with this, with Lord of the Rings. I'm sure you're all familiar with Lord of the Rings. And you can see that this is a structure that's used by a lot of people. Your two priests / wizards, which are dealing with the truth, with finding the right way, with understanding the right path to take. You've got your true priest, wizard in Gandalf, and then you have your false one, your snake, in Saruman. Okay? So again, it's in the garden. You've got your Adam and you've got your snake. And what do you have to do? You have to kick that snake out of the garden in order to get the Fellowship of the Ring on the right path. Something like that. Then you have your two kings. Now we go from garden to land, and you've got your true king and your false king. And again, now up here, it's about truth and finding the right way. And here it's about rulership, right? Boromir does not have his own passions under proper rulership. And so what happens, all of a sudden, he starts attacking his own people in order to try to take the ring. He tries to attack Frodo. So there's this idea that Aragorn has himself properly orientated, which is head, body, or passions subjugated to the head, and Boromir does not. So you've got your good example and your bad example. And then finally, when you go into the belly of Leviathan, which is, in this case, it's Mordor, that's going down into the root structure of the world, or out away where the Leviathan is, the main antagonist, you've got Gollum and Frodo. So, so if you're thinking priestly, kingly, and then prophetic, you've got to generally, you're planting something in the belly of the beast. In this case, they're planting, you could say, the ring. Of course, in Tolkien, you might say people call it an anti-quest. They say you're trying to throw something away rather than take something with you. You're not taking the elixir out of the belly of the beast. You're throwing away the ring. Fair enough. There's variations on the theme, but the fact of the matter is that he is planting something in the volcano. He's going to the belly of the beast and planting or depositing something, and that's the idea. The idea is that you put something in the belly of the beast that will grow and feed off of it from the inside and grow into this tree of life. Something like that. Okay, so this is what I've been working on and studying. I think this stuff does fit in, like I said, to the 7 basic plots in some sense, but I'm starting to now branch out from just exploring Christopher Booker and the 7 basic plots and his version of the 7 basic plots. And I'm trying to build my own story theory. I hope you can sort of see that. I've always felt that the Joseph Campbell approach, the typical screenwriting approach that you'll find in all these screenwriting books in Hollywood, has been slightly disappointing to me because it's not dealing with some of those deeper resonances that are instinctually there. I think people do kind of like, they understand. Whoever wrote Hoosiers, I watched a couple interviews with the screenwriter. He wasn't necessarily anybody brilliant or special in terms of knowing story structure. He was a movie producer, and then he wrote this screenplay, and it was his first screenplay, and it became successful. But they did a lot of research in the town about basketball and about the ethos of basketball and everything like that, which I think gave him a lot of real world psychological data that he could sort of hang these concepts onto. And so that'll happen a lot of times too, is where when you're looking at a real life phenomena like Hoosiers basketball and a real basketball season, and looking at how people have retold the legend of that famous high school basketball season, what happens? It comes out in this archetypal form. I would argue that it's the reason why wasn't because the screenwriter thought it up, but because he was listening to the legends that the townspeople had told themselves over and over and over and over, and then he was writing it down. So there's something like that, some kind of a process where the stories get told and told and told, and they refine and refine and refine until they finally come out in this kind of like a sculpture of the archetypal form. And so that's all I'm trying to do is just point out, let's familiarize ourselves. Let's familiarize ourselves with these archetypal forms, and then you'll be able to recognize it when you see it, and you know, you'll be able to say, okay, I kind of know what I want to do now here. Here's my beast character. Here's my serpent character. Here's my Leviathan. Here's my garden. Here's my land. Here's my sea. Something like that. So please leave a comment and let me know what you think. Talk to me on Twitter. This is a expansion of my story theory. So I'm excited about it. I'm once again, I'm going to just keep going until I can finally work my way into having a book or having a class about this. So again, thanks for being along for the ride, and I'll see you next time.